Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Australia's Tabletop Wargaming Network. As per usual, I'm ScottyD, and tonight we have got the Risky Rollers GT Power Behind the Throne tournament preview, and we've got Dalton, the TO for the tournament. How you doing, mate?
Here, I'm keen to talk about our tournament and Victorian tournament scene, and awesome to be on the channel and network.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time out to come and join us as well. Really appreciate that. So if you haven't seen one of our tournament previews before, ladies and gentlemen, what we do, we get the TO on, we talk about the tournament, we talk about the format, we get to know the TO a little bit as well, and hear about their history in playing 40k and how they've gotten into the hobby and such as well. And these are live streamed on the ATWN's Twitch channel, and we also put them up on YouTube a couple of days after the live stream as well, in case you don't manage to join us for the live. But we do have chat going as well. I want to welcome everyone in who is joining us in chat. It's great to have you all joining us. So yeah, Dalton, let's jump in. Why don't you give us a brief introduction about yourself, how long you've been in the hobby, what armies you play, your involvement with the Risky Rollers, things like that.
Well, I've been in the hobby for, I recently found out to my own horror, a bit over 10 years. I started back in, I thought it was 2013, but I have White Dwarfs dating back to early 2012, so it would have been back then. So I've been in the hobby since then, played Necrons all the way through my favorite army from the beginning. These days, with the Risky Rollers YouTube channel and that kind of stuff, there aren't a lot of armies I don't play. My main ones competitively in singles are Leagues of Votan because I love squats. Even though they're bad, I'm going to keep playing them. So that's what I do there. Otherwise, Necrons and Eldar are probably my competitive picks. I'm going to a tournament to try and play hard. I'm passionate about the hobby for a bunch of different reasons. Competitive play is good fun, but for me, it's all about the lore and the conversions and all the different, bringing the world to life. That's the hobby side of things. It's really what I'm passionate about, what I love to spend my hobby hours on, whether that be 40k, 30k, or a wide variety of other games.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So glad to hear, it's not just all comp 40k all the time as well.
Weirdly enough, despite being probably the main TO for a lot of that stuff, I'm probably the least competitive-minded 40k player in the Risky Rollers group, in our core group.
Oh, that's awesome. Love to hear that. And, it's always good to see well-balanced hobbying aspects as well. So awesome to hear that you enjoy the hobbying side as well as like the lore and stuff too.
Yeah. Well, one of the best things about the hobby for me, at least, is that even when I get tired and burnt out of doing one specific thing, there's always something else I can do that's still related and I'm still passionate about and still find really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
Definitely agree with that myself. I'm definitely an all-rounder in terms of everything, so I definitely relate to that for sure. Awesome. 10 years in the hobby. That's a long time. I'm just thinking, how long have I been in? I think it's 15.
I'll caveat it a little bit by pointing out that it's only really the last, last 5-6 years that I've been sort of active and really pushing to get projects finished and get out and play a lot of games. A large portion of that was sort of as I was finishing school, and it was the hobby I tried to do but didn't really have enough money for. And so I only really got to do it every now and again. But 10 years of being around the hobby, I guess.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So, you briefly mentioned the Risky Rollers. Why don't you share a bit more about what you guys are all about, what you guys do in the community, the events you run, the content you guys create, stuff like that?
Yeah, so Risky Rollers is a channel that myself and my good friend Lockie Betts started a couple of years ago now. And we, of course, have Lawrence Gutierrez, or Trajan Valorance, as is known in our Discord. Absolute mad lad himself, who has come on board as well. And basically, while we're a YouTube channel and we do all this event stuff, we actually started as a local club, sort of coming out of one of the big Nurgle Plague lockdowns we had over the last few years. We thought we'd come out of that. We'd run this club over in the eastern side, and a bunch of us got together and had a great time doing that. And from that, we grew into building the YouTube channel, where we do 40k live streams twice a week, as well as run a podcast, which is the set I'm currently on, as well as we do pre-produced and coming tomorrow night, the first live streamed Horus Heresy games. We've played Age of Sigmar before, and I'm actually working on a project for that at the moment, as well as just doing anything and everything hobby related. We do tournament recaps, all that kind of stuff, and we're looking into doing some of what you do as well, and streaming some of the tournaments coming up. Potentially something coming out for that later in the year, which I'm really excited for. But Not going to confirm it's happening yet because we haven't quite made sure it can work.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do that, and from doing that, we then we did Risky Rollers. It's been through a few iterations and a few changes, the YouTube channel, and then we sort of went, well, let's, we're all passionate about people playing more 40k. Let's run some events, see how we go with those, and just get as many people out playing the game as we can. So back in 2022, it was our first time running events. We ran 40k as the way with all of our studio game terrain. Just like a fun, casual event. I think we ended up with 14 or 16 players show up to the first one. Demand for that was way higher than we were expecting. And it was just an awesome day and an awesome way to do it. So we decided, well, there's clearly a hunger for tournaments out here. No one in Melbourne, like in the Melbourne and Melbourne greater area, is really doing a lot with it, especially coming out of the lockdowns and things. So we sort of went, well, cool, we'll jump in, we'll push hard to make the best tournaments that we can. We'll have casual ones if you want to go to those. Our competitive ones, we're going to push really hard to make them like really competitive. Try and innovate a little bit on some of the tournament formulas to just make the events run really smoothly, and sort of provide the best player experience that we can.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
So that's pretty much it. Then this year has been a fantastic year for us tournament-wise. We've sort of we started off the year and we're still going all cylinders firing. We're running basically as many tournaments as we physically can. Just try out as many different things as we can. Try it as much as possible, as well as just providing as much play space as possible for everyone to play in. So yeah, we've run. I didn't do a count before this. I think we've run about 14 or 15 events so far in the year.
Yeah, wow.
Including 2 Kill Team tournaments, the 2 Blood Bowl tournaments, the second of which was yesterday. They're my favorite ones to run, by the way. They're awesome. And then, of course, Power Behind the Throne next week, which is the second GT in our own little competitive circuit for down here in Melbourne, which will culminate in the Risky Rolls Open in November.
Yeah, awesome.
That's a lot to go over, but that basically summarizes our tournament scene and how we do that there.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you mentioned that you guys have got your own circuit. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Like, what is kind of the go with that? How do things work? Like, is there a culmination event at the end? Go for it.
Absolutely. So the Risky Rollers competitive series, or competitive circuit, is something we basically came up with at the end of last year. After we ran the Open at the end of last year, which was a phenomenal event. It went off fantastically. We sort of had a look around and went, well, you've got the big ITC circuit across the world, and that's all well and good, but there's not a whole lot of stuff going on locally that covers that. You sort of have Oz Masters and the different Masters events in different states sort of covered that a little bit, but they unfortunately had a bit of an issue with being very cliquey and very closed, especially down in Victoria over the previous sort of 5 years or so. They were very much sort of invitational events that only got opened up at the end, although there's some fantastic work that had been going on the last couple of years to change a lot of that. And I want to give a huge shout out to Blog for the Blood God and Dean Sinbeck for doing a lot of heavy lifting on making sure that whole tournament scenes are a lot more open and inclusive for everyone.
Yep.
But basically, we sort of went, well, no one's running that kind of thing at the moment, so we'll do one. We basically said, all right, what does that need to entail? We ended up coming up with this thing where we would run a 3 GT and 2 RTT series over the course of the year. The last GT, and that being the Risky Rollers Open. And the idea basically being that you can go to any of these events and they function absolutely like a normal event. There's nothing different about them. But if you go to more than one of them, it basically automatically enters you into this Risky Rollers Championship circuit. And then the winner at the end of that would be the person who's performed consistently the best across those tournaments. And we've got I did a bunch of maths, spent basically a weekend figuring out how the best way to rate and scale all the different performances and things, how to make sure you don't just go to all 5 and automatically win, or you don't just win one and therefore you've got it. And it's very simply comes down to your best 2 performances are rated and the other are rated highly and the other 3 are weighted quite low. And if you don't come to a tournament, it's the same as just coming pretty much last in the tournament you didn't go to. And yeah, that's basically it. At the end of that, at the Risky Rollers Open, we'll crown the champion of that event, and we'll also crown and put on an ongoing shield and so forth, the champion of the Risky Rollers Championship Circuit. And that'll hopefully be an ongoing thing that we run, as well as a massive cash prize for it as well, because we thought, let's really incentivize it, let's put some stakes on the table, see how far we can push competitive 40k in the area.
Yep.
So that's basically what that idea was, and what we're still doing it with. That's had to adapt and change a little bit since both the Games Workshop announced their official World Championships of Warhammer sometime after we announced this, and then Diffie and all the phenomenal lads over at the OCC announced they were doing the OCC, and that whole thing was forming. So obviously we've had to adapt and change it a little bit. Over the next couple of years, we're looking to develop it to work alongside the OCC, given that that's also hosted and focused in Australia, can be hosted down here in Melbourne. We don't want to be stepping on their toes and vice versa. We try to make sure that people can get to tournaments that they can get to, play as much 40k as they want, and if they want to play competitive and reach those upper levels and compete against the best players in the country and the world, that they've got the path to do that no matter where they are.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even just keeping an eye on the scene as a whole, it's been really good to see a lot of the TOs are actually coordinating, not just within, say, for example, New South Wales. It's also more broadly, like Victoria is included in that, Queensland as well, South Australia a little bit. So sure, RTTs might clash, but the bigger GTs, for the most part, don't clash. So it means they're able to get more players to those bigger GTs, which is always great.
Absolutely. And like one of the things that's helped with that really has been just how connected everyone is on Facebook and on Discord and through social media and stuff. There are a bunch of TOs that can just talk to each other and go, well, hey, when are you guys running events? When are we running events? We're thinking about these dates. There were a few weeks of conversations right at the start of the year between myself and our team and a bunch of others, particularly in Victoria, but also across New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia, to make sure that we weren't going to do that, because we don't want to, if the Ratcon boys are running an event out in Ballarat, we don't want to be running an event at the same time. We don't want to be stopping players from traveling for their events and vice versa.
Yeah, so I guess a bit off the back of that, do you want to just talk a bit more about the Victorian scene in general? How often are events occurring, and are they like, do you have RTTs every month that are occurring within the state? Or is it more like you got one GT a month, one RTT a month? What does that kind of look like? How big is the scene in general? How many players would you say are more playing competitive 40k consistently? And what would you say like are the local hubs for people to actually be getting games in regularly if they are looking to just play 40k, or even if they are looking to get into the competitive scene, where can they get those more competitive style games?
So I'll kind of approach from the top down. There's three big hubs, as far as I can tell, in Victoria for games. There's smaller ones around, of course, but the three big ones are out in Ballarat. You've got all the lads from Ratcon. And they're running events throughout the year. Their big one, Ratcon, the titular event, is coming up in the next month or two, I believe.
Yeah.
They also run a few RTTs, Rat Trader tournaments throughout the year. And then they also ran, right at the start of the year, an event that I attended with a few mates, their first teams event, which was a lot of fun. The Strength in Numbers teams event. If anyone's keen for a good teams event and you don't want to come along to ours during the year, they've got theirs out in the start of the year. Absolutely fantastic fun, well worth the weekend. Teams events are one of the best ways to play the game. So go check that out. So they're up in Ballarat. People all around the state know them. They've got a good name for it, and it's well deserved. They run an event really smoothly. Hamilton's a great guy to deal with, and you can travel up there for Ballarat for events all the time. Then out in Geelong, you've got the Target Acquired lads. They run Geelong Town Open, Geelong Heresy with two big flagship events, and then a bunch of other smaller events throughout the year. I think they probably run a fewer events than the Ratcon boys. And as far as I can tell, they're also a lot more focused on the local Geelong scene for sort of smaller, semi-regular events and small groupings getting together. But they're big events. The Geelong Town Open, which this year happened, I think, the week after 10th edition dropped, was an absolutely wild event for just having the meta sort of settle down over the course of the weekend. Then Geelong Heresy, which is a massive 3,000 point casual tournament, typically in November. Just a bit of fun. It's worth, you go down, you get on the booze, and everyone has a great time.
Yeah.
I've got some stories to tell from that event, but that's always good fun. And then out here in Melbourne, there aren't any sort of big groups that run a lot of tournaments, or that there weren't, and that's sort of where we came in, and we sort of went, well, let's make sure that there are things happening in Melbourne. And so I'd say that we probably run the majority of events in Melbourne or the Greater Melbourne area. most of which centered around the east side in Waverley and Moorabbin. If anyone's local, they might know where that is. There's a couple of events out in Gippsland, as well as out west. They run a few local sort of tournaments and things. But as far as big organized ones, that's mainly what we cover. And then, yeah, we've probably doing more events than anyone else, but not that makes them better or not up for debate. But we've made an effort this year to make sure we have at least one event running every month.
Yeah.
So I think the first month we didn't was July, because with 10th edition dropping, we sort of went, let's run our last 9th edition event on RTT. Let's give it some time, let it settle, and then come back out in August, which we are next week. And then September's another month that's up in the air, purely because of the timings of 10th and WTC forcing us to shift a few of our timings around. But at this stage, we are still hoping to run Ascension alongside Block for the Blood God in September, which is a great, fun, casual event where each round your army gets bigger.
Nice.
Which is a format that he used to run a few years ago. We're hoping to bring that back and get it going. And yeah, as far as the focus across Victoria, you definitely see a lot of players showing up in force for the big competitive events. Ratcon, as I mentioned, down in Geelong Town Open and our own Risky Rollers Open in November, being sort of the three big competitive events that I expect people to get out to. And then, depending on where you are and which play group you're in, there's definitely a bunch of people really hungry for competitive 40k. I've definitely seen in the local Melbourne group, you've got a lot of smaller areas where people, a lot of smaller local groups that play all sort of their, and they sort of power scale to themselves. But then people that they're going to travel for events, and there are plenty of them, definitely want to bring the pain and want to compete in those top tables. Yeah. So the local hubs that I can point out as well to answer the last part of the question. If you're looking down, it's going to be particularly focused on the eastern side of Melbourne, because I don't have a huge amount of knowledge to the west. I know you've got Melton's and Tethers games out there, so you can go check them out if you're looking for places to play. Coming around up north, you've got Warplings up in Flemington and Axes and Ales, which are two of the bigger wargaming clubs. They're fairly well established. Absolute great lads. I've been to both of them for a variety of different games. Great guys. They do a bunch of great stuff. If you're in that area, great places to go. I know that the Warplings crew have been running a few more events, like small, like evening events and things recently, little 2-round tournaments and stuff like that. So absolutely great bunch of people. And then coming around east side, you've got sort of groupings up in Ringwood area. You've got House of War, Games Portal, and a Warhammer store, all within like 2 blocks of each other. So there's a good group of players that'll cruise through there playing a bunch of different things. You've obviously got us. We run our tournaments. We also run our club out here in Waverley, which we took a bit of hiatus over just before 10th launched, and then we've been coming back strong with that. Now the 10th is out, and so we're running that out in Waverley. So you're more than welcome to come along there. And if you're down south looking to play the big ones I can think of, there's a bunch of guys out in Gippsland who play a bunch. And then I know General Games down in Frankston run a monthly Warhammer RTT. It's a 1,500 point 40k RTT on the last Sunday of the month, I believe. We've got a couple of lads in our group that like to go down to that regularly. And they're definitely sort of aimed at sort of catching for everyone. So if you're wanting to really brew up and play on that competitive edge, there's definitely a few players there who you can sort of get to grips with. But it's also really open to newer players getting involved. And then, yeah, each sort of local store tends to have its own group of players as well, sort of going regularly. The one that I work at, General Games in Malvern, we've got our own group of lads there that aren't super interested in getting out into competitive play, but definitely like to, within our own group there, sort of really push each other to get better at the game and to run some really powerful lists and combos. So yeah, I feel like it's a pretty comprehensive look over across the local scene.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's actually really encouraging to hear not just how many clubs you've got outside of stores, but also the amount of stores as well. Because from my own personal knowledge, like I've known for years about House of War, and there's a couple other ones that I've heard about, but I haven't, like, there was probably half dozen to a dozen stores you rattled off there. And it was just like, okay, wow. There's a lot of independent stores in Melbourne that are supporting the hobby and supporting the 40k scene, which is awesome to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's going to be a bunch I didn't mention as well, just by virtue of there being a whole lot around. Other big ones to mention in the city, of course, you've got plenty of games, which are fairly new, mostly card focused, but recently they've started to open up for a lot of miniature stuff. 40k is still probably a bit big to run up there, but a lot of kill team play, a lot of Blood Bowl play, a lot of D&D stuff happening up there. And then, yeah, general games, of course, sponsor for Risky Rollers, so I've got to mention them, and I work at one of their stores. So we do a bunch of stuff in Churnside, Malvern, and Frankston. We're running a kill team league, starting a 40k league pretty soon, as well as doing a bunch of other miniature related activities. And then, there's more out the west that I think Midian Gaming out there as well, and some more that I definitely know that I'm missing. And there's a couple of stores up north, same sort of thing. It's not my area. I'm not going to pick them off the top of my head, but there are definitely some more up there.
Yeah.
You're swimming in game stores down here. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is definitely awesome. So we've looked at the Victorian scene in general. Let's hone in a little bit now on the Power Behind the Throne GT that is happening this weekend. Let's have a little
20th of August.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the tournament format. What are you guys running in terms of your format? I know you guys have got a code of conduct, so if you want to briefly just encapsulate what that's all about. For you guys, they're very common, but they do vary. As well as the terrain, and we're actually going to have the opportunity to talk about the first mission that you're willing to preview for the tournament as well.
I'm pretty keen for that, and I'm sure some of the lads watching are. Shout out to everyone who's tuned in for that. We are going to preview the first mission for the day, or for the weekend. But before we get to that, so there's nothing going to be stand out about the format and too different. 5-round GT, 3 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. 3-hour round timers for each round, which we've held over from 9th edition. I know some tournaments, including a teams event I went to recently, set round times to 2.5 hours. And potentially, as people get better at 10th and the whole game speeds up, we might end up decreasing our round times. But at the moment, 3 hours still seems pretty reasonable. 2.5 is pretty rushed. Nothing too crazy is going to be that different there. One of the, I guess, innovations that didn't seem too groundbreaking, but it's not something I've seen done anywhere else yet, that we do at our tournaments, is we make sure that in between each round, the tournament organizers are the ones that actually set up objectives and terrain for each mission. So players, all they need to do, they rock up to the table and they play the game, and then they leave again. There's no extra work required there, which means that the round time of 3 hours is actually 3 hours, as opposed to being 2.5 hours and you spend half an hour setting up the table.
Yeah.
So things like that that we're going to be doing as we always do. And then that's basically going to be about it. Our tournaments always have a mission pack and terrain pack sort of done beforehand. This is the first time we haven't had it up in addition to the player pack, purely because 10th edition being so new, we sort of had to make sure we try them out, really sort of give them a good testing and make sure the terrain layouts work. Something in particular I want to mention, we had some feedback on 2 of our 9 layouts from last edition about specific ways the L's were set up on the table that didn't allow certain staging areas to actually work as well as we thought we did. So that's one of the things that I've specifically been testing on these ones, making sure that both combat and shooting armies can get those lines of fire and hide from them. So I'm actually really keen to see players come out and play on the terrain pack we've got set up. And then mission-wise, we're running basically out of the Leviathan mission pack. I think we've got a couple of our missions where we've changed out the twist on them to make them a bit more interesting, or where we thought that they could use a little bit of just changing it up. But otherwise, let's see, what was the other one? Oh, the code of conduct and how we run that. So the way we set up our tournaments to run, as far as people signing up for them and getting information, is a little bit different as well. Instead of just having sort of the common ways, you've got a Facebook event and it all goes up through there, and the player pack sort of viewable through there as a PDF and stuff. We've got it set up so to view the player pack, you actually enter a Google Drive document, and there's actually several files for you to choose from. This is so that we can, on our end, adjust and change things as we need to without interrupting and having to make a big announcement that we've changed stuff or we've moved around, including things like adding terrain packs, having a separate code of conduct so the player pack isn't 300 pages long, and so on. The player packs are fairly extensive. I don't think I ever expected anyone to have read the whole thing. It's mainly there so that if there is information that you need, it's probably there. And if not, you can, of course, contact me or someone about it. And that's all accessible through Facebook. And then instead of paying us directly straight into one of our bank accounts, we also then run tickets through one of our sponsors, Dice Arcade. This is mainly just to have a little bit of separation between us receiving money directly and it going through a licensed or a registered business and a registered vendor. And I tend to think it's a bit nice to then you get an email confirmation, you get a receipt of the ticket, all that kind of stuff, and it then gives us a really good count every day of who's buying tickets and how many we've sold and so on. Finally, the code of conduct was, I think, the last thing you asked about specifically. Look, I don't like that we have a code of conduct. I feel like we probably don't need one. I don't know how much swearing is allowed on the podcast.
A little bit.
A little bit. All right. Well, if I can use my little bit for today, a code of conduct should basically, all you need to say it should be, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
And basically that's what our code of conduct says, just in a lot more words, to cover a bunch of different bases. Thankfully, I've never had to actually resort to bringing it up and going, hey, look, you agreed to this. But it just exists there as a catch-all. If we have people who are cheating, if we have people who are being bad sports, etc., it means that I've got a document that I can go, hey, look, you signed up to this tournament and you agreed to play by this. You're not, please leave. Thankfully, I've never had to do it, and hopefully I will never have to pull it up again. But it's one of those things where we thought it best just to make sure we get in early, put one up, and have it as part of our sort of expected and standard procedure. Because look, at the end of the day, it's a hobby. We're playing with toy soldiers. Everyone can chill out a little bit.
Yeah. 100% agree. 100% agree. So yeah, being a TO a little bit myself and having to handle code of conducts and doing similar things, I definitely agree that, sometimes competitive players just need to chill out a little bit, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But look, that said, players in general have been fantastic. I've never had a problem with never had any major problems with people. And the tournaments we run, we've always had people come in, wander through, and one of the things we encourage is spectators. We go, come down, have a look. Don't interrupt players while they're playing a game, but if they're standing around, feel free to ask questions and stuff and see what the hobby's about. And we always have a few people come through and do that, and it's never been an issue with anyone. So that's always been good.
Yeah, that's awesome as well. I know we were at Capital Clash 2 weekends ago, week and a half ago, and we had spectators coming through as well. So it's always good to see people being exposed to the hobby and seeing what it's all about, and not just being like, oh, cool, what are those guys actually doing, and then not actually finding out. So,
yeah.
So I think let's talk about this first mission, and I'm also going to bring up the terrain setup for the first mission on screen for everyone as well, and we can kind of talk through it a little bit, so we can kind of explain how this is all going to work. So we've got, for the deployment, it's search and destroy, which is your table quarters. You've then got...
With a little 9-inch bubble around the middle, you can't deploy it?
Yep. You've then got take and holds your primary, so it's for each objective you sit on, you get 5 victory points up to a maximum of 15 a turn. And the standard thing where if you go first, you score in your command phase battle round 5. If you don't, you score at the bottom of the turn. And then the mission rule for this one is targets of opportunity. Now, this is a bit of a wordy one. Literally, this is the card that is full of text. So I'm going to read through
There's a lot
this.
of text on there.
Yeah.
So if I may summarize, it's fairly simple. It's just the text is there just to cover all the different bases. It's surprisingly well-rounded for a GW bit of rules text. Basically, you draw 3 objectives instead of 2. The first half of the text just says if you're running the tactical objectives, you just draw 3 instead of 2. And the second half of the text says if you're running fixed objectives, you still choose 2 fixed, and you exclude all of the fixed from the deck, and you draw an additional tactical objective each round, basically. And they work the same way as normal. It gives you access to the new order stratagem and so forth. And it also points out very carefully that you can't use the new order stratagem to discard your fixed secondaries. And yeah, basically, this is actually one of my personal favorite mission twists you can have, because it just means you've got more options, more things to do, more things to think about, and more things to actually stop your opponent doing. So it kind of ups the ante on a lot of the way the missions play, and just means that while you've got more opportunities to score points, you've got more opportunities for your opponent to stop you as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's the first time I've actually seen this card being used at a tournament. I'm not 100% certain if I've written it into one of my league packs. So I guess for me, when I look at this, as goes cool, you've got that diversity in your scoring for your secondaries, 100%. Primary, you've kept it the simplest primary you possibly can as well to counterbalance that, because you don't want to have 50 million things going. Like I could imagine the worst combo you could possibly do for this one, outside of doing like ritual or servo skulls, is probably the purge the foe, which is like hold one, hold more, kill one, kill more, and then you've got 2 secondaries that are fixed, and then your tactical one, or you got 3 tacticals. You have to manage 7 different scoring opportunities.
5 different things, and
So I do like that you've kept it like cool. There's some complexity on one of the sides, but let's keep it simple on the other, so it's not too complex overall.
So I do have to shout out as well, because I agree, and I think it's a really, really nice setup for the mission. Shout out Lawrence Gutierrez, who is the one of us who designed the mission and tables initially for the tournament. I don't do everything. We've got other lads that do a bunch of stuff, and Lawrence is helping us out with doing all the missions and things. So I do want to give a big shout out to him. And I think he's done a fantastic job. And this is a mission that I'm personally excited to see play. It was also a choice to make it the first mission, because we don't want to be getting to round 3 on day 1 and everyone's tired, everyone's getting to it and go, oh yeah, now think about 5 different things to score. So there's a reason it's placed where it is. But I'm excited to see how some of the armies that maybe struggle to interact as much but can play their scoring game really well, how this changes their facing into the really big heavy hitters like Custodes and Eldar.
100%, because they're just absolutely being such a problem at the moment. I'm not sure if you kept track of the WTC at all, but it seemed
I was actually shout out to the Aussie lads coming in third. I was following along very closely to WTC. It was a really, really riveting tournament to watch. Keep up with.
Yeah, I was the same. I was following the Aussies, and it was like, you'd look at the rounds and you're going, oh gosh, Chris Wright's got another 15 or 20 with the Eldar. It's like Chris
Wright is an absolute machine, in the best way possible. He's a beautiful man, beautiful bloke.
That Eldari are really good at the moment, as you said, Custodes. But I think there's a couple of sleepers that we're starting to see come out of the meta, stuff like Necrons as well and Thousand Suns. 2 factions that I think are a bit slept on.
So I think a couple of things are there as well is really interesting. I think T-Suns have largely just slid straight through the middle unscathed from all the nerfs. So I don't think they've been hit with anything. And which is really interesting, because they were one of the big scary threats when they first came out. When all the indexes dropped, everyone sort of went, oh wow, T-Suns can do a lot of damage. And then very quickly overshadowed by Eldar, Custodes, Knights, and GSC. Necrons were again one of the initial big threats, but they got hit really hard with a nerf that no one really talked too much about, when they just went, cool, when you reanimate, you can't string anymore. You have to stay within range of models that were there at the start of the phase, which makes multiple phase reanimations even harder, and basically got rid of their whole all the jank they used to rely on just to score objectives. And I think that's probably the main reason we haven't seen a lot of them recently. But then with the nerfs to Eldar and to pretty big nerf to GSC, but the nerfs to Eldar, the nerfs to Towering, although the lack of a fix is interesting, and then the nerfs to Custodes as well, through the way some of that works, it's let things like T-Suns and Necrons that had that initial drop sort of climb back up through. And the recent FAQs and erratas and so forth have actually made the Necrons even better. Transcending Catan is hilarious now. But one of the things I've noticed with that as well is that the big thing it's done is give them a really good, very expensive action monkey, which is one of the biggest things they lacked. Was they could drop a bunch of stuff in really easily that would immediately get Overwatched off the board. And now they have one that you basically can't touch. Suddenly they can play those missions. I'm really excited to see how that actually happens over the weekend. I think this is the first tournament I'll actually be able to watch and see how they do. And how it all plays with all the new stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a bit about this train. I'm going to cover the map. I've got it up on screen for everyone in chat, and thank you to everyone who is joining us in chat. Great to have you joining us. I'm going to go from bottom left to top right, and I'm going to go up and then across. So starting in the bottom left, you've got a kind of a forest piece, and then in the middle left, you've got some containers. Next up on heading towards the right, you've got this massive 2 kind of L's to make this U-shaped building, and then in the top left as well, you've got an L. Then keeping on moving on the left, you've got another forest on the bottom there as well. And then you've got crates right next to it, and it's basically mirrored as well. So it's an symmetrical terrain design. And then you've got two big L's in the middle as well. And I believe the L's that are in the middle have got windows, whereas if you look at the U's and the L's in your deployment zone possibilities for this one, which if I flip my card around to the side, the two U's are going to be the deployment zone. So the L's in the no man's land on the objectives are fully line of sight blocking as well. So that's definitely going to help with towering.
Absolutely. So a couple of things to mention with the terrain. First thing, one of the things that might be hard to see on the map packs themselves are we've got perspex bases for all the big L's. So the smaller L's are WTC size, slightly smaller than WTC size, and the big L's are about the same size, and they're on slightly larger bases. And we'll be treating the bases as you expect, as they are the whole piece of ruins. So the line of sight blocking areas, if you're standing a little bit back from them, are actually way larger than the pieces you can see. Mm-hmm. The terrain itself is a complete set plus two pieces of miniature scenery density set, DENCITY, which is something that myself and Sinbeck from Book God helped Tim design for that. And basically, the way we describe it, it's WTC style terrain with our own layouts on it. And one of the things we went into it going, we want to make it different from WTC to provide a different tournament experience. If every tournament runs the same terrain, it's boring because you play on the same thing all the time. WTC and a lot of the big team tournaments do run WTC style terrain, which is fantastic because you get to go to those tournaments, you know what to expect. They're really easy to scale for medium, heavy, and light tables, and different varieties thereof. But then depending on where you're attending tournaments, you get different tournament layouts, different terrain layouts. And I like to think the ones we use are great to play on. You've got good ways to play and good options and things to do, but they're going to be different enough from everywhere else you play that probably still find it interesting and a bit different to play. We also wanted to make sure there was more than just ruins everywhere. So I think we've got 3 or 4 forest pieces on this one.
4, yeah.
4, yep. Just because we sort of went, well, coming from 9th to 10th, we lost a lot of the nuance and differences in terrain. And we wanted to make sure we still had some variety on it. And you still have options, you still have choices to make about where you place models and how you interact with terrain. So we're sort of making sure to include a few more forests and things there as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we spent a lot of time testing it and making sure that they will work well to play on. So you can play combat armies on these, and they'll have places to hide. There are places you can hide from towering, and there's places that knights. There's a few points, I believe, on every map where knights can't pass, but they do still have access to the entire board. Yeah. Which is one of the big things I'm passionate about. Is I think that everyone should be able to access the whole board, but you should have to make decisions about where on the board you go. So there's places you can hide from towering, and importantly, there are places that you can't. There are windows on the top floor of the central ruins, but not on the bottom floor, because we didn't want to have a whole central section where knights could just see the entire board. And then there aren't windows on the U-shapes or the L's in the corners. Yeah. And I believe the L's in the corners are the shorter L's. They're only the 5-inch high ones, and they have a top floor. Yeah. So you can stand on top and shoot over the edge, whereas the ones in your deployment zone, the big U's, are made up of 2 pieces, one of which is a big L with no top floor, and the other is like a little corner piece, which is the only piece on the tables that aren't from the miniature scenery set. It's a corner piece with a top floor as well, so you've actually got a place you can stand and a place you can't on the same terrain piece.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. The orientation as well is set up so that, again, if you can get knights in the right place, they can actually get into the L, and they can see it and they can shoot in. But there's somewhere there you can hide a big knight and hide from a big knight, which we thought was really important as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I think with 9th, what we saw a lot of was, sure, you could hide from knights really easily and you could deal with them. But once they started getting close and they were able to see you, they could interact. And with 10th and the way that they opened up towering, where it was like, oh, no matter what the line of sight is, in terms of like the actual ruin rules, if you can see, you can see. And so, you know, as we were saying earlier, the meta's really seen Imperial Knights, not as much Chaos Knights, just because they're some of their faction rules, but Imperial Knights have really jumped up into that kind of S tier. So yeah, having something where you can provide some cover for the Knights, whilst also meaning that armies that are playing into Knights have some places where they can hide from them as well, I definitely agree is really important.
Yeah. Look, I'm not sure how much time we want to spend on it either, but this is something that was very specifically learned from the recent Steel City Showdown tournament we went to. We had a few experiences with Knights there, and there were two standout games into a couple of WTC players where I played into Knights into both of them. So I played into Will, Milton and Knights, and then into Denise and Knights. And I got table pick on the first one, they got table pick on the second one. And just the way the terrain setup worked hugely impacted the way the games went. They both ran identical lists, and I obviously had the same list for both games. So it was a really good testing ground to feel out how both styles of terrain went, and really get a good feel for how to play into Knights and how to find that balance, hopefully somewhere in the middle where you can play with them and against them, and it's not oppressive for either player. Yeah. Which is sort of that sweet spot that I think we're all trying to hit.
Yeah, definitely agree. The other thing that I'll note that I've literally actually just noticed with the terrain map, normally you would see the two center Ls, they'll kind of be set up in the other way so that you don't actually have fire lanes directly through, but you've gone the other direction. What is there a kind of bit of reasoning behind that choice?
Kind of. The reasoning behind that was, and depending on which table, we've got a few different table setups for the weekend. Depending on the table setups, some of them you can get to center objectives without being seen, and some of them you can't. And basically, the way they're set up is to force choices about that. We didn't want to make maps where every single terrain piece, every single objective, you could just be hidden upon and not interact with someone. We also didn't want to make a map where you just, if you put anything in the middle, it's just a kill zone and it immediately dies. So the way we set up the Ls is to try and sort of get around some of that. The idea being to basically, because we've got them set up in the opposite direction to a lot of the Ls you'll see. And I think we've got two different orientations on the map to play around with. The idea basically, it means that you're going to have some fire lanes into them, and there's going to be spots in the map where if you really want to expose a unit, you can get fire lanes into little staging areas, but you've really got to make that decision and commit. One of the things that we were aware of are things like Eldar fire prisms that get around it. Obviously, out of line of sight stuff we can't do anything about. Yeah. But things like Eldar fire prisms and so forth are definitely key to take advantage of this kind of thing. We kind of wanted to make sure that it was difficult enough to get in there. I don't think it was this map that I tried it out on, but I know one of them, we specifically moved the terrain piece, and I fiddled around with a little bit to make sure that if you did have a fire prism out looking into some of the big central staging areas, you couldn't link fire. It was hidden from the others, and stuff like that. Yeah. So just trying to make sure that we do have options. If you are playing a shooting army into like Custodes, for example, where if they touch you, you're dead. We didn't want to just make it so the Custodes could just walk up the whole board without being seen. But we wanted to give them the option where they could, if you wanted to get to them, you had to really push for it. Yeah. Yeah, which is... and that's why the Elves set up the way they are in the middle.
Yeah, which is, I think it's good because it provides a player experience where the player actually gets to dictate the terms in which they engage to a certain extent. Because then they're not necessarily super constrained by the way that, the terrain's always set out this way. I've played on this a million times. I know how to play into it and make the terrain work for me, like particularly Custodes, for example, who will just bound from terrain feature to terrain feature. This one, for example, is like, cool. They're normally moving as quick as they can towards you, and it's like, well, if you move onto that center objective, you're open in the middle of nowhere. Are you going to still kind of push that forward with your main brick, or are you going to take a whole heap of firepower before you actually get into your opponent's army and then be depleted in such a way that maybe you're not as combat effective when you do get into combat? So I do like that choice, that it makes the players think. And I think having terrain that makes players think is good.
Yeah, no, cheers. And there's also we made sure that you can avoid that as well if you need to. There's staging areas you can work your way around the whole board, and if you're going to get shot off in the middle because they've got the right lines of fire and stuff, then if they've managed that, they don't have lines of fire to other parts of the board where you can bring your way around.
Yeah.
It was one of the things that I'm happy to admit we sort of messed up a bit with in 9th edition was one of our specific terrain layouts. I believe it was for the scouring. There was a place like that. We had the L set up very similarly in the middle, but we hadn't provided adequate cover from the sides, and there was no other option for combat armies other than to walk into the middle and get shot, which is something that we don't want. We don't want to have an army that you go, oh, you've gotten this terrain layout and you just can't play on it. But we did want to also just make sure that we did force a decision about it.
Yeah.
So,
So actually got a question from chat for you. We got Dark Justice asking, I see Imperial Knights having an issue on this terrain, but Chaos Knights will love these tables. Oh, look, terrain walkthrough out with a strat. Yeah. So
Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights, they interact with terrain a bit differently. Chaos Knights, to begin with, I'm expecting a lot more War Dogs and Armigers, or smaller class of Knight. In which case, again, their bases are the same size in width as the big Knights. So anywhere that big Knights can or can't fit, they also can or can't fit. Chaos Knights obviously have the stratagem to walk through walls, which is pretty funny. And look, that's a challenge that you're going to have to deal with Chaos Knights. You're going to need to screen inside buildings and things if you don't want them walking into them. There's not a whole lot we can do about that terrain-wise. It's just what it is. And I think it's an interesting challenge. Their army's way less oppressive than Imperial Knights. They have way less consistency and reliability. So I think it's not something I'm super worried about becoming overly oppressive, although obviously if it does, we'll adapt and we'll change with it. Imperial Knights, again, the main thing we look at them was we wanted to make sure towering in the way, the amount of firepower they can put out isn't oppressive. There's still places for them to get to everywhere on the map, and there's still places for them to hide everywhere on the map. But they have to make a decision about, are they hiding completely, or are they going to poke out and see stuff, and therefore be seen in return? And that's basically what it comes down to. It's not going to be hugely impactful that you can't get through certain gaps. The gaps that you can't get through are usually towards the outer edges of the board anyway. So you'll still be able to get in towards the middle. I think it was this terrain set, you've got, near those big L's, you've got little crates down beneath them.
Yeah.
It's on the outside of those you can't pass, the inside of them you can. The distances are a little bit hard to read off the picture. But they're all designed to be sort of 4 inches out, so you can definitely fit a Night base through. And yeah, look, there's always going to be some form of either Knights too oppressive or they're harder to play. I think we definitely, especially personally, I tend to err on the side of make them a little bit harder to play, rather than having them as this big oppressive damage force. But yeah, look, it's something we're definitely keen to see. If you want to run Knights in the weekend and give us some feedback on it, we'd definitely love to hear it. These aren't like 100% fixed for every tournament we run for 10th. That's why we're trying them out. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely keen to see how it plays. And I'm hopeful that it'll make them a little bit harder to play, you're right. But hopefully that provides a better game experience for everyone who plays it, including the Knight players, to actually sort of challenge them to be a bit more careful with the movement and how they position and get ready for shooting phases.
Yeah. Sounds like very reasonable in terms of your approach, for sure. Then we got one more question, and this will be the last question on terrain. We've spent a bit of time on terrain, which I'm fine talking about terrain. It's good to actually discuss it. I don't think enough people discuss it. But we got
it's a little bit weird. I can't see the terrain in front of me at the moment, so I'm kind of going from memory of like the different terrain layouts we've done for the weekend. But I'm pretty comfortable with this one. We tried it out a bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, all good. So we got Sin Alive in chat asking, do you allow terrain adjustments for stuff to fit? So I dare say that question is more tailored towards stuff like Bane Blades, Shadow Swords, those kind of size models.
Okay, so there's two things with that. The first one being, very quickly, one of the exceptions we take to the WTC terrain FAQ and stuff is that we allow for changing for fortifications and things. One of the things that Games Workshop introduced in 9th edition that we've carried through into this player pack and these missions is that if you're wanting to run a fortification, I mean, best of luck to you. But if you're wanting to run a fortification and you can't place it anywhere on the field, you're allowed to call a TO over. and we can remove a terrain piece in your deployment zone to place the fortification. It won't necessarily be the one of your choice. It'll probably be the one that's closest in size to it. I'm imagining the small little ruin piece for that one, but we do allow that. Regarding things like Bane Blades and so forth, at this stage, we're erring on the side of not shifting terrain around for them. Primarily because we sort of look at it and go, if we're going to use the terrain to try and sort of combat some of the issue with knights and other big sort of stat check and skew armies, one of the either casualties or unexpected bonuses, depending on your opinion of super heavies and 40k, one of the casualties of that is going to be that super heavies as a whole are going to be a bit harder to play. Rogal Dawn tanks should fit everywhere on the battlefield. Bane Blades and Shadows and that chassis as a whole probably won't. You probably also struggle with some of the Heresy Space Marine ones, the Kratos chassis, and some of those, although I believe they're all in Legends now anyway, so it's not relevant. Land Raiders, again, fit pretty much everywhere that a Rogal Dawn does. And I think they may also not fit through the areas where Knights don't fit. I'd need to double check sizes, but I believe they're about the same width.
They're about the same size in terms of when you look at the base footprint. I think the Land Raider's a bit bigger than a Knight base in terms of the footprint.
So they'll fit everywhere a Knight can fit and won't fit where Knights won't fit. And the same will be true for the Bane Blade chassis and everything built on that. We're not, at this stage, it's not something we're looking to do, is to allow terrain adjustment so your models will fit through, primarily because part of what we're trying to do with terrain is limit some of the bigger models. It is to try and not penalize, but just force different decisions and force you to take into consideration that there are downsides to bringing massive points intensive firepower units.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And we've got Regor in chat, who is the miniature scenery guy that you've mentioned that has done the Den City.
It's Tim. Hey.
Yeah, Tim in chat. Yep. Welcome in. Great to have you joining us as well.
Huge shout out to Tim. I messaged him yesterday about getting 4 more terrain sets done up for the weekend, and he's already cut them and set them out. Absolute mad lad. Do check them out, miniaturescenery.com, for any MDF scenery and model needs. They're fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So, whilst I just swap some stuff over here, let's talk about some players that are in attendance, some notables.
Yeah.
Because there are a few. We were talking a bit before stream, and you were saying you're expecting around 30 to 40 players, even though BCP's only got the 28 in at the moment.
Yeah, so BCP sign-ups are always a bit delayed from ticket sales. We've sold 32, 34 tickets last time I checked, and we've got a few days left on those. Speaking of which, if you're listening and wanting to attend, we've got links, I think, down below to the Risky Rollers events Facebook page, or in chat, or wherever that's working, and you can go on there, you can see the event, you can buy tickets and stuff. But yeah, so we've got 30 to 40 players is the expected player size. And we've got a few notable ones there. Obviously, a few of the real big names are away in Belgium for the WTC.
Yep.
So this will be an interesting one to see how the field plays out when they're not here. We do have some big hitters definitely coming to the event. A couple of lads that I went away with to the Australian New Zealand Team Championships being Reece Cunningham and Dylan Cowan, worth mentioning. Dylan Cowan in particular, fantastic bloke, absolutely crushing it at tournaments over the last 12 months. Really been going hard, winning a bunch at the end of 9th edition and cruising into 10th with a phenomenal grasp of the game, really adapting to it very fast.
Yeah,
I'm definitely excited to see how he comes along.
He's currently, from my understanding when I last checked it, I think this might have shifted after the War Masters and WTC, just because of how many players are there and how many points are up for grabs.
Absolutely.
I think he was number 1 in the South Pacific for the ITC.
I think he was. I think we had that conversation while we were away for the team's event the other week. Yeah, definitely. And like it's well deserved. He's really put the hours in, and we've seen him come through a bunch of our tournaments, sort of just steadily getting closer and closer to the top spot, and then nailing it several times in a row. He's really put the hours in, put the work in, and he's out there competing with the best of them. I got to go when we went away to the ANZTC with him. Got to see him come out of nowhere, a name that no one knows. And take on some really big, well-known players who perform really well and just absolutely body some of them. And it was fantastic seeing some of the teams go, who's this guy? What's he doing here? Why is he here? Only for him to turn around and be one of the biggest wins for our team for that round. It was fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. So Yeah, he's actually got his faction in BCP at the moment.
Yeah. What's he got for that one?
He's got Deathwatch. Now, I will admit, I'm a Deathwatch player myself, so I'm
Very
actually
nice.
really intrigued to see what spice he's come up with.
Yeah, so Dylan's the joke is that he's a Space Marine player because he runs them a lot. He's a Tyranid player to begin with, but we always give him stuff for playing Space Marines at a bunch of the tournaments recently. But yeah, so Deathwatch is probably one of the, if not the best, of the Space Marine factions to run at the moment. I was recently looking right into some of their stuff with it, and just how versatile their kill teams are. Different character support that you can just arrange in different ways than you can normally lets you sort of really optimize the Space Marine army. Instead of having to take units that tax you 7 troops for the 3 guys you actually want, you get to just build these weird combo kill team units, put the right character support on for things they normally can't attach to, and really make some powerhouses. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what he comes out with for that. Definitely one of the factions that if he can pull it off and really push it up the ranks, it'll be well worth shouting out because they're not doing super well after their big nerf.
Yeah, I was looking at the MetaWatch article that Games Workshop actually released, and you're right, they are the best performing Space Marine faction. I think they're sitting at a 51% win rate, which is surprising because all the other Marine factions are below 49, which is really intriguing to me. I'm like, what are Deathwatch players doing that's got the spice? I dare say I'm going to pull a bit of a Vanguard Tactics thing here because they did a podcast and I listened to it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Putting a character in there and then giving them the Beacon Angelus, going 4 frag cannons, the 4 heavy thunder hammers, and just dropping them in with the rapid ingress strat for 0 CP and just going in the backfield doing a bunch of damage is probably something that is maybe not as common as what we're seeing it at the moment, because Deathwatch are... I'm not sure of the player numbers of Deathwatch, but I know that towards the end of ninth they're a bit lower. They
had a rough run of it in ninth. Just throughout ninth, their books didn't ever feel like it worked the way it was supposed to. But coming into 10th, they've got one of the very few, I think maybe 2 non-Gladius attachments you might take. And theirs works really, really well with their kill teams because you can set them up however you need to. You can tool them out to do exactly what you need done. And then you can use their version of the doctrines to make sure they do it. So yeah, like you got your big damage bombs like that. Even one of the ones that I think is a bit of a sleeper, and I could be entirely out of this, I don't play a lot of Marines, is the Phobos kill teams they can take. The
Spectrus
kill teams. The fact that you've got the infiltrate and the little 12-inch screens and stuff all built into the same unit, and you've got all that flexibility there, and you can attach a bunch of the different characters to them. I feel like those themselves are actually really strong units if used in the right way. The way they can screen and infiltrate while still retaining damage capability, especially the snipers, the eliminators, to hunt down characters in a lot of armies. I think they've got more play than they're seeing, and I'm keen to see some people do some fun stuff with them.
Yeah, also keeping incursors in that unit as well, because when you shoot at them, you can pick one unit to get +1 to hit against. You combine that because they still get Oaths of Moment on that, so you can make your snipers do some really good stuff. So I definitely see that combo as well. So we've talked about Dylan, and is really going to be interested to see, because list subs Thursday, you were saying?
List sub is Thursday night. Yeah, we kept it nice and late. A lot of it's just to do with the fact that we're still figuring out all the stuff regarding terrain and missions. We kept it pretty late, so Thursday's list sub, I'll be up midnight Thursday night making sure that the lists go live as soon as that's done, so everyone can see those and prepare for that. So it should be pretty good. We'll also, we previewed the mission earlier in the stream here. The rest of our mission pack will be going out after list sub as well. Typically the terrain pack's out, but mission isn't. In this case, because we're only doing up the terrain for the missions we're doing, that's all coming out at the same time after list sub. I wanted to make sure at least one of the missions and the terrain maps got out, so people could at least get the idea of what we're running.
Yeah, for sure. And then just looking through the playlist, there's a few other names that I personally recognize. I also recognize Boyd Morrill as well. Is probably another player to keep an eye on. I believe he was on Team Vic for the for Oz Team Champs this year as well, in some capacity.
Not this year, but last year he was back up in Madawi for that one.
Yeah.
So Boyd again, great bloke. One of the lads from Legends and Lore down here. Great bloke and phenomenal 40k player. He ran a lot of Space Wolves and stuff last edition. I'm not sure. Has he got his faction up on BCP at the moment? I don't think I checked that one earlier.
He does not, unfortunately.
I'm not sure what he's running for this one, but having seen him play a few different games last edition, coming to a few different tournaments, and attending, of course, ANZTC the year before alongside him, he's very flexible. One of the things, he can definitely flex into a lot of different roles. So, I mean, I'm not really sure what he's bringing. I know he's got access to pretty much anything he needs. So I'm interested to see what that comes out to be. I don't see him as an Eldar player, so I think he's probably going to bring something a bit more creative, a bit more interesting to the table. And I'm keen to see how that comes out.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing I'm always intrigued about 10th events at the moment, is because it is the Wild West. Like, outside of those top 5 factions and maybe Necrons or T-Suns, even Necrons and T-Suns to a certain extent have variety. Necrons a lot more than T-Suns. But it's good to see a lot of different armies coming up with wildly different builds, which is it's good to see.
Yeah, definitely. The freedom you've got with all the lists and things you can do at the moment just makes it really interesting to see what people come up with and different ways they try and approach the big problems, the big stat checks that exist in the meta at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that is a bit of that's everything that I've got on the run sheet for tonight for the preview. So Dalton, I'm going to throw it to you. Do you have any shout outs you want to give for the Risky Rollers? Anyone else you want to shout out as well? Feel free to go for it.
Yes, I mean, look, I've thrown a couple in throughout the stream when they've come up and been relevant. But yeah, so for competitive 40k in Victoria, check out vic40k.com.au. It's a site run by Block for the Blood God and Dean Sinbeck that just tries to tie together a big calendar for Victoria, all the different competitive names and different competitive events. And sort of just create the central place where information's available for everyone. So go and check that out. Shout out to miniaturescenery.com, as mentioned earlier, for their fantastic terrain sets. If you are a TO and looking for terrain, go check them out. The reason that this terrain set in particular is so good is one of the logistical things. The entire table of terrain packs into a box about this big.
Wow.
It all collapses down into itself, which for players doesn't really mean a lot, but for TOs means that we can transport so much terrain so easily and store it really easily. So that's fantastic. And then, finally, I'll point out, go check out Risky Rollers. We do 40k live streams, both in the competitive and casual end. We do Horus Heresy. We do a little bit of Age of Sigmar. That's sort of stepping up a little bit. We run all these tournaments. You can check out the Risky Rollers events Facebook group, which we're posting in constantly. We are active on YouTube and all that. We do events. We run a club, so check that out. That's organized through our Discord and through the events page on Facebook. Make sure to check all that out. If I might go on a little bit of a tangent about the event that I'm most excited for this year, just to sort of push it a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
We've just confirmed the date for the Risky Rollers Annual, which is our big end of year charity event. That we're running that on the 10th of December at the Moorabbin Bowling Club, which is our sort of standard venue for all of our bigger events. So people who've come to them before will be fairly familiar with it. This is the second time we're running it, so it's finally deserving of its name. And it's a massive multi-system event. This year we're running Warhammer 40,000, the Horus Heresy, Kill Team, and Blood Bowl, same as last year. We're also going to be running Age of Sigmar. And then if it comes out early enough and I can get it all organized, we're also going to be running some tables for Legions Imperialis at the event. And basically, all of those different game systems get their own little mini tournaments in the day. It's all done for charity. All proceeds from the event go towards the Smith family. Last year, we raised a bit over $1,000, put 2 kids through school this year. We're hoping to far exceed that this year.
Yeah.
And just have a fantastic day. We'll have raffles, we'll have door prizes, we'll have painting competitions, we'll have massive prize support coming from General Games, as well as just everything that you can want to make it a fantastic day. I'm already sorting out bits and pieces for that, working through stuff for I've completely blanked on what to call them. Little stuff you get when you come to a tournament.
Yeah.
Little player gifts and stuff like that. Swag, that's the one. Little swag bags for everyone. It's just going to be a fantastic day. It's the event that we all enjoy running the most, and it's the event that I like to think everyone has the most fun at. Plus, it's Christmas. It's all a bit fun at the end of the year. So if nothing else, make sure that's the event you get to. 10th of December down in Moorabbin. And that'll all be up on the Risky Rollers Events Facebook group, and then posted everywhere that I can find an open text box.
Yeah, we've got the links for the Risky Rollers YouTube and the Risky Rollers event group for Facebook up in chat there. If you're watching us on YouTube after the fact, they'll also be down in the description below. But we'll definitely look to probably get yourself and maybe even Lockie on closer to the Risky Rollers annual to give it a bit more hype, talk about it, because an event that's really close to my heart is Exterminatus, which is down in Wagga, and those guys do it to fundraise for the some of the men's sheds in local areas, or the defense men's shed that they're now doing it for their next event. So I definitely have a spot in my heart for charity events. Like it's just so good to see the wargaming community come together and support other facets of society, and to also put our wargaming powers together for good.
Absolutely. Like if we can turn our fascination with playing with little toy soldiers towards something that actually helps out real people in real situations, I don't think there's anything better we can do.
Yeah, definitely agree. But yeah, Dalton, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been awesome chatting with you and getting to know a bit more of your background and get to know a bit more about Risky Rollers and stuff. For everyone in chat, if you did enjoy the stream and you want to see more content from us, you can drop us a follow here on Twitch, but also I'm going to throw the rest of our socials into chat, or if you're on YouTube after the fact, they're down in the description. This will be up on our YouTube channel on Thursday this week, so you can check that out there if you want to. If you came in halfway through and you want to catch the rest of it, you can head over there as well. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it from us here at the Australia's Tabletop Wargaming Network for this evening. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me on.